In the annals of criminal history, few cases have captivated the imagination as thoroughly as the Hinterkaifeck murders. This tragic and perplexing event occurred in 1922 on a small, remote farmstead in Bavaria, Germany. The farm, known as Hinterkaifeck, was situated between the towns of Ingolstadt and Schrobenhausen, approximately 70 kilometers north of Munich. It was here, in the quiet rural countryside, that an entire family was brutally murdered under circumstances that have baffled investigators for more than a century. The Hinterkaifeck farm was home to the Gruber-Gabriel family, a small, insular group that kept largely to themselves. The patriarch of the family was Andreas Gruber, a 63-year-old farmer who was known in the community as a stern, hard-working, and somewhat authoritarian figure. Andreas's wife, Kazilia, was 72 years old and was reportedly frail and in poor health. Living with Andreas and Kazilia was their 35-year-old daughter, Victoria Gabriel, who had been widowed during World War I when her husband, Karl Gabriel, was reported to have been killed in action. Victoria had two children, 7-year-old Kazilia Gabriel, who was named after her grandmother, and 2-year-old Joseph. The family also employed a maid, Maria Baumgartner, who had only begun working at the farm the day before the murders. The Grubers were a private family, and their relationships with the surrounding community were strained. Andreas was known to be a harsh and domineering man, and there were rumors of an incestuous relationship between him and his daughter Victoria. These rumors, which had circulated for years, added to the aura of suspicion and secrecy that surrounded the family. Victoria, despite her father's controlling nature, was active in the local church choir and had relationships with several men in the village, further complicating the family's already fraught social standing. In the weeks leading up to the murders, strange and unsettling events began to occur at Hinterkaifeck. Andreas Gruber confided in neighbors that he had discovered a set of mysterious footprints in the snow leading from the nearby forest to the farm. But curiously, there were no footprints leading back to the forest. This discovery unnerved Andreas, and he conducted a thorough search of the property, but found nothing out of the ordinary. In addition to the strange footprints, the family began to hear noises in the attic, described as footsteps or the sound of someone moving around. Despite repeated searches of the attic, they could find no evidence of an intruder. The family's unease grew when they found an unfamiliar newspaper in the house, a publication that none of them had purchased or read. To make matters worse, a key to the house went missing, further heightening their anxiety. Victoria Gabriel mentioned these incidents to her friends and neighbors, expressing her fear that someone was watching the family or planning to harm them. However, these concerns were largely dismissed by those she confided in, who assumed that the Grubers were simply being paranoid. On the evening of March 31, 1922, the Gruber-Gabriel family and their maid were brutally murdered in what is considered one of the most heinous crimes in German history. The exact sequence of events is unclear, but based on the forensic evidence gathered at the time, it is believed that the killer or killers lured each family member into the barn one by one. The first to be attacked was likely Andreas Gruber, who was struck in the head with a mattock, a tool similar to a pickaxe, inflicting fatal injuries. His wife, Kazilia, was next, followed by their daughter Victoria and her daughter, young Kazilia. Each victim was killed in a similar manner with brutal blows to the head. The bodies were then stacked on top of each other and covered with hay. After the murders in the barn, the killer or killers entered the farmhouse and found 2-year-old Joseph in his crib. The child was killed in the same brutal fashion, as was the family's new maid, Maria Baumgartner, who had only been on the farm for a single day. Her body was found in her room, lying on the bed. The killer showed a chilling level of calmness and calculation, as they appeared to have stayed on the property for several days after the murders. Smoke was seen coming from the chimney, indicating that the stove was being used. The family's livestock was fed, and meals were prepared in the kitchen. This suggests that the killer made themselves at home in the farmhouse, living among the bodies of their victims. The murders went undiscovered for several days. The Gruber-Gabriel family was reclusive by nature, so their absence from church services and from the community was not immediately cause for alarm. However, after the young Kazilia failed to show up for school and Victoria missed choir practice, neighbors began to grow concerned. On April 4, 1922, 5 days after the murders, a group of concerned neighbors decided to check on the family. When they arrived at Hinterkaifeck, they were immediately struck by the eerie silence that hung over the farm. The house appeared to be in disarray, with the doors and windows shut tightly. Upon entering the barn, the neighbors were met with a horrifying sight. The bodies of Andreas, Kazilia, Victoria, and young Kazilia were found stacked on top of each other, covered with hay. Inside the farmhouse, they found the bodies of Joseph and Maria. The gruesome discovery shocked the local community, and the police were quickly called to the scene. However, the investigation was plagued by numerous missteps from the outset. The crime scene was not properly secured, and curious villagers trampled through the house and barn, contaminating evidence and making it difficult for investigators to piece together what had happened. The investigation into the Hinterkaifeck murders was one of the most extensive in German history, but it was ultimately unsuccessful in identifying the perpetrator or perpetrators. The police interviewed dozens of potential suspects and witnesses, but no one was able to provide any solid leads. The forensic evidence that was collected was limited and inconclusive, and the police were unable to establish a clear motive for the crime. One of the primary suspects was Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a neighbor and former lover of Victoria Gabriel. Schlittenbauer was one of the first people to discover the bodies, and his behavior at the crime scene was considered suspicious by some. He was seen moving the bodies and handling evidence, which led to speculation that he might have been trying to cover his tracks. However, despite these suspicions, there was no concrete evidence linking Schlittenbauer to the murders, and he was eventually cleared as a suspect. Another theory suggested that Victoria's husband, Karl Gabriel, who had been reported killed in World War I, might have survived and returned to exact revenge on the family. This theory gained traction due to reports that Karl's body had never been definitively identified. However, there was little evidence to support this idea, and it was ultimately dismissed by investigators. Other suspects included disgruntled former employees of the Gruber family, vagrants passing through the area, and even members of the local community who might have had a grudge against Andreas Gruber. Despite the wide range of potential suspects, no one was ever charged with the crime, and the case gradually grew cold. The Hinterkaifeck murders had a profound psychological impact on the local community. The idea that someone could commit such a brutal crime and then remain undetected created an atmosphere of fear and suspicion. People began to distrust their neighbors, and the sense of safety that had once pervaded the rural area was shattered. The case became the subject of countless rumors, with everyone from neighbors to itinerant workers being implicated in the crime. The lack of a clear motive for the murders only added to the mystery. Some speculated that the crime was the result of a robbery gone wrong, but the fact that nothing of significant value was taken from the farm cast doubt on this theory. Others believed that the murders were motivated by revenge, possibly related to the rumors of incest within the Gruber family or to Victoria's relationships with other men. One of the more outlandish theories posited that the murders were the work of a supernatural entity, given the strange occurrences that had been reported in the weeks leading up to the crime. The eerie footprints in the snow, the sounds in the attic, and the missing key all contributed to the idea that something otherworldly might have been at play. While such theories are not taken seriously by modern investigators, they reflect the deep sense of unease and fear that the case has engendered over the years. Over the decades, the Hinterkaifeck murders have been revisited numerous times by both professional investigators and amateur sleuths. Each new generation of investigators has brought fresh theories and perspectives to the case, but the mystery remains unsolved. In the years following the murders, several attempts were made to crack the case. In 1923, a year after the murders, the Hinterkaifeck farm was demolished, and the bodies of the victims were exhumed for further examination. Despite these efforts, no new evidence was uncovered, and the case remained cold. In 2007, a group of German students studying criminology conducted a review of the case using modern forensic techniques. Their analysis pointed to Lorenz Schlittenbauer as the most likely suspect, but they acknowledged that the evidence was too circumstantial to reach a definitive conclusion. The students' findings were widely publicized, but they ultimately did little to advance the case. More recently, the advent of DNA technology has sparked renewed interest in the Hinterkaifeck murders. Some have speculated that it might be possible to extract DNA from the evidence collected at the crime scene, which could potentially identify the killer. However, given the age of the evidence and the contamination that occurred at the crime scene, the likelihood of this happening is slim. The Hinterkaifeck murders have left an indelible mark on the history of German crime. The case is one of the most infamous and enduring unsolved mysteries in the country, and it continues to fascinate and horrify those who learn about it. The story has inspired numerous books, documentaries, and even fictional works, each offering its own interpretation of the events that transpired at the farm. One of the reasons the Hinterkaifeck case has remained so compelling is the sheer brutality of the crime. The murders were not only violent but also deeply personal, suggesting a level of hatred or madness that is difficult to comprehend. The fact that the killer or killers were able to evade capture and seemingly disappear into thin air has only added to the mystique of the case. The Hinterkaifeck murders also serve as a stark reminder of the limitations of forensic science and criminal investigation in the early 20th century. The mistakes made by the investigators, particularly in preserving the crime scene, are a sobering reminder of how far law enforcement has come and how much it has yet to learn. Today, the Hinterkaifeck murders are often discussed in the context of cold case investigations. The case is frequently cited as an example of how time can complicate the resolution of a crime. As the years pass, evidence deteriorates, memories fade, and the chances of finding the truth diminish. Despite this, the Hinterkaifeck case continues to be a subject of interest for modern criminologists and historians. The mystery of what happened on that remote Bavarian farm in 1922 serves as a powerful reminder of the darkness that can exist in human nature, and of the fact that sometimes the truth is not just stranger than fiction, but also more elusive. As we approach nearly a century since the Hinterkaifeck murders, the case remains one of the most chilling and perplexing unsolved mysteries in criminal history. The combination of a brutal crime, a remote and eerie setting, and the complete absence of a clear motive or suspect has ensured that this case will continue to be studied and speculated upon for years to come. The Hinterkaifeck murders are more than just a cold case. They are a window into the fears, suspicions, and uncertainties that can haunt a community long after the crime itself has faded from memory. The truth behind what happened on that lonely farmstead remains shrouded in mystery, a dark chapter in the annals of history that refuses to close. As investigators, historians, and armchair detectives continue to pore over the details of this case, one thing is certain: the Hinterkaifeck murders will continue to captivate and disturb anyone who delves into the chilling details of this unsolved crime. It is a story that, despite the passage of time, remains as unsettling today as it was on the day the bodies were first discovered. The echoes of those tragic events still linger in the shadows of Hinterkaifeck, a place where the answers to a century-old mystery are buried deep, perhaps never to be unearthed.